Namaste everyone. Thank you for joining in this video on Rahu in the second house and how it behaves, when this head of the serpent goes into the second house. So this video is a part of the ongoing series on all about the nodes. The series is titled as All About the Nodes, and we'll be looking at the implications of the Rahu Ketu axis, how the nodes behave in different houses, as well as the remedial measures that we can perform with regards to these positions. Okay, so before we go into the meat of this video, kindly subscribe to the channel, like the content if you find it useful, and share it with your friends and family if you think it is going to help them as well. Okay, so when Rahu goes into the second house, it assumes the name of Kulika. Okay, so Kulika is considered to be a talking head who has lost control of his tongue and therefore lies or speaks harshly. Kulika has the power to channel or manipulate language, voice, or song. So there is often when Rahu goes into the second house and assumes this form, there is often a focus on food and sustenance, conflict management, disease, family, finance, and speech. And the native may be a charismatic speaker or singer, even though occasionally guilty of bombasting. Okay, these people have exotic tastes in food or drink and are capable of savoring or digesting things that would be shunned by the average person. Okay, so such people may be arrogant or rude in speech, and as a result may end up hurting the feelings of family members or even make rash commitments that cost them money. Okay, so Rahu is all about the psychological aspect. In fact, the nodes are all about the psychological aspect. So how does Rahu behave when present in the second house of the horoscope? So in general, Rahu in the second house is troublesome, okay? Because the second house is the house of, it is known as the Kutumbasthana, and Rahu being a shadowy planet, it casts a shadow on one's family and thereby one's sense of security via some defects regarding the face or speech or voice, because second house is also the house of early education. So it may impact one's education or sources of knowledge, and most commonly the financial status of such natives. Okay, now Rahu, as we know, it represents desire and obsession, while Ketu denotes ambivalence and detachment. And with Rahu in the second house, which means Ketu will go to the 8th house. So this will create a bias for accumulating securities, for example, money, family, education, at the cost of ensuring security with whom we share a relationship. Okay, the second house, as we know, also rules the mouth and the eyes. So the native may have facial features that fascinate or mesmerize onlookers. Okay, or he or she may be obsessed with things to do with the mouth or eyes. Now, innocently enough, it could mean collecting vintage eyewear, and sometimes, very bizarrely, some people having Rahu in the second house may end up having peculiar habits like collecting teeth and bones. Now, Rahu also signifies foreign objects, and the native may be the recipient of a body part, for example, an eye from a donor in the aftermath of an accident or illness. More commonly, it can indicate dental reconstruction, using false teeth to replace those lost to decay or accident. Okay, the second house also represents appetite. So a malefic planet like Rahu in the second house indicates a potential for poor diet, eating disorders, and addictions of all kinds. And typically we can think of oral administration, for example, drinking or smoking, but any form of consumption is applicable, and it could include inhalation as well as intravenous injection. Okay, now substance abuse can include anything that harms the body. For example, sugar addiction may be worrisome for the pancreas and kidneys, or smoking is worrisome for the lungs. Okay, and from a vegetarian point of view, even meat and eggs are regarded as wholesome foods. And we know that bad food has consequences, isn't it? People with bad diets often suffer poor digestion, bad breath, or even compromised teeth. Okay, now the planetary influences on Rahu will provide several clues on the nature of the addiction. Okay, for example, say Mars associating with Rahu means that the person may demand coffee, while Moon associating with Rahu means the person may demand alcohol, or Saturn, joining Rahu means that the native enjoys tobacco, and similarly Venus indicates sugar cravings. Now, if nothing else, then Rahu's obsession may simply indicate one who eats or drinks to excess, and more innocently, these people may have exotic tastes in food or drink, savoring or digesting things that are usually shunned by the average person. Okay. Now, intentional consumption is obviously a way of polluting the body, right? Some people are exposed to passive contamination. For example, food poisoning is always accidental, it is not intentional. Similarly, breathing secondhand smoke or toxic fumes in an industrial environment is always accidental, right? So the second house rules the mouth, but it also includes the lips and tongue, which can be regarded as sexual organs, right? And sometimes, or most often, we refer to a person as having a weak or strong sexual appetite, as if such experience was something to be swallowed or tasted or even digested, not to mention savored in the act of consumption or subsequently in memory. Okay, so a compulsive Rahu in the second suggests that the native may have difficulty controlling either of these tongues, literally the mouth, metaphorically the genitals. And when there is difficulty in controlling one, the other becomes a problem. So while the drug addict or alcoholic or food junkie has little or no control over his physical compulsions, he may also suffer the craving and unregulated indulgence in sexual activities as well, right? With with all the consequences that follow. So the native may suffer from maladies involving sexual organs, for example, genital warts, STDs, malformation of the sexual organs, bad odor or taste of the genitals, etc. Right? Now, the second house also rules the voice and speech. So the native may have a flair for the spoken word via diction, oratory, music, or poetry. And if Rahu is influenced by benefics, the native may be a singer with a good musical voice or an orator capable of inspiring others with his or her powerful words or the uplifting content of his or her message. Now, since Rahu also represents the foreign element and the second house rules speech, so these people may have an affinity for foreign languages, right? Because the second house is a repository for knowledge via education or via experience, and this could lead the native to become a scholar in anthropology or study some oral tradition whose origin is foreign. For example, Ayurveda, right? A Westerner studying Ayurveda or an Indian studying, traditional Chinese medicine, or even a Westerner studying jyotish. Okay. And because Rahu is a proxy or it is a shadow of Saturn, it signifies mimicry. And in the second house, it is best done through speech. So whether the person can imitate the vocal mannerisms of some famous people or duplicate the intonations of a foreign language, the principle is the same. Okay. Now, as I said, the native can be a charismatic speaker, although occasionally guilty of bombast. Now, Rahu in the second can also contaminate what comes out of his or her mouth. Okay, because Rahu is a malefic, so it may spoil the voice, the speech, or the content of his or her communication. So as a result, the native may have a very rapsy voice, a stutter, or some other speech defect. Perhaps, he or she cannot carry a tune. Okay, and although these people may be cunning in speech or writing, there may be a disparity between what the native intends to say and what he actually says. Okay, so his own words may present a blind spot or a liability for his intended message. Now, such a native may also be prone to outbursts or spontaneous verbalizations. There could be some amount of profanity used in the speech, or maybe, the native could be an outright liar. Okay, or maybe the things that come out of the mouth of a native are toxic. For example, bullying or malicious or racist expressions of anger, sarcasm, or even invective. Okay, now because the second house also represents family, so family history may be very important to the native, especially if the lineage grants privilege or access to things that others cannot have. So people with good family connections gain access to universities, fraternities, golf clubs, financial institutions, etc. And with this Rahu Ketu axis in the second or second eighth houses, family themes may be related to trauma and death, inheritance, secrets, and the unconscious urge to dig things up. And sometimes this digging can be for noble reasons, for example, tracing the lineage of a family tree. But at other times, it can be for ulterior motives, like, for example, trying to get the goods on other people to reveal or provoke a scandal. Okay. Now, the family can be a huge source of trauma. Okay. And the native's early childhood may be fraught with emotional upheavals. Some family members may be physically, emotionally, or mentally unstable, causing a ripple effect through the family and the psyche of the native. And with Rahu in the second house, a stranger in a strange land phenomenon may apply to the family. The native may feel different from the rest of the clan, example being the black sheep of the family. And compared to the rest of the family members, he or she might feel unattached, like a misfit. In some cases, he or she may suspect that, he or she was adopted because they are so different from their parents or siblings. Now, Rahu is disruptive, okay? It is grasping and rebellious. So in the second house, it can indicate family feuds, opportunistic in-laws, and members disowning or disinheriting others when they do not conform to family expectations and standards. Now, Rahu in the second house will also indicate a desire to acquire security. Now, for some, that security may come from money. For others, it could be the comfort of family, including memorabilia that maintain the illusion of their presence. Okay. For yet others, security is accumulated knowledge in the physical form of books and libraries, or the intellectual validation of certificates, diplomas, or other degrees of formal education. So Rahu in the second house is obviously omnivorous, and it can indicate an insatiable appetite, as I mentioned in the beginning. Okay. So no matter what these people eat or what these people have eaten, they are still hungry. And no matter how much education they have, they would want to learn more. They would want to learn more. No matter how much money they have, they will crave for greater wealth. No matter how much prestige their family already holds, they will desire higher honors. And because the second house rules money, the native may benefit financially through any of the karakatva of Rahu, for example, grandparents, foreigners, languages, drugs, research, etc. Now, Rahu is also compulsive. Finance can be a chronic sore spot for the native, because such a native can be unstable in money matters despite his or her obsessions. Okay. Now, treasuries may be an important theme in the life of these natives, and although money is an obvious store of value, others are also common. Art curators, antiquarian book collectors, librarians in charge of databases, all are custodians of things representing value. And the native may be a passionate collector of books, coins, jewelry, stamps, wine, and photographs, especially of the family and ancestors. Now, the second house also rules memory, okay, another store of value. So the native may be obsessed with developing powers of recall. For example, some people, they take pride in reciting long passages of poetry. Others have an affinity for history or languages, and both of this demand recall of pertinent information. The native may also take an inordinate interest in history, especially involving his or her family, the lineage, the country, his or her art collection, or even his or her wine cellar. And because Rahu is a surrogate, so in the second house, it implies appropriating something which is not your own. Okay, for example, embezzlement of someone else's money for your own use, or it could mean borrowing a famous family name to create value for one's own reputation. Okay. Now, since the second house is the 8th house from the 7th, by the principle of Bhavat Bhavam, it represents second marriage, and the native may experience a newfound passion not previously encountered in the first marriage. Okay, some exotic quality of the partner, regarding courtesy, foreignness, uniqueness, or charisma can mesmerize the native. And propelled by fascination or obsession, this marriage may take the native to places he or she has never been before, whether in terms of local or nature of the relationship. Now, this might represent a great leap forward, but because of Rahu's illusory nature, nothing about the relationship may be quite what it seems. Okay. Now, the second spouse may defy the norms of family and friends, coming from a different ethnicity, culture, socioeconomic background, age group, or religion. And the partner may be seen as an interloper, and the native accused of upsetting the social order by introducing a foreigner into the family. Okay. So this is about Rahu in the second house. Do let me know if you agree with this analysis. Of course, some of it would match, some of it won't. But do let me know in the comment section regarding your experience or the experience of others who have Rahu in the second house. Okay. So that's it from me in this video. In the next video, we will be discussing about Ketu in the second house and how it behaves, or the psychological impact it causes upon the native due to its presence in the second house. All right. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you want a consultation or a discussion regarding your chart, kindly reach out to the number given in the description box. Okay. So thank you so much. I'll see you again in yet another video. Namaste. Om Gurave Namaha.